Well, let's go to some other issues. Two seasoned reporters I'm bringing in for you tonight. The Australian's Rachel Baxendale, who joins me now from Melbourne. And in a minute, we'll be joined by Sky's Darwin Bureau Chief Matt Cunningham, who certainly had a busy day up in the top end today with a resignation, shock resignation, of the Chief Minister there. Let's go to that wage hike promised by Anthony Albanese. It's caused ructions right across business this afternoon. Two things here. At 5.1%, employers have slammed that increase as unsustainable. You've got to add super on top of it, of course. They say it'll fuel inflation and cost jobs. But secondly, as I just went through there with Trudy, the government doesn't deliver on wages. That's something for the Independent Fair Work Commissioner to set. Matt, it'll be very attractive to voters, but this is smoke and mirrors at best or reckless at worst, isn't it?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And I noticed that Anthony Albanese, when he's been pushed on this issue over the past few days, including during the debate on Sunday night, he wouldn't lock in to say, that Labor would lift those wages. So, it's a difficult situation, isn't it? Labor's been campaigning and criticising the government, saying, they're not doing enough to help, workers who are being caught out because of rising inflation, and yet, they're caught in this catch-22 situation, when they're not committing to this either.
Well, and they can't deliver it. It's a bit like those ads from Clive Palmer that says, vote for me, I'll keep your mortgage under 3%. And there's no way in hell he can do any of that, right? It just buys a vote. And then on the other side of the election, there's voter remorse. Let's go down to Victoria. Rachel, great to have you on the show, because I know you don't mind holding the Premier down here to account. He was out today. We've been told Daniel Andrews is toxic in the polling in Victoria for Labor, but he was there out alongside his old left-wing factional mate Anthony Albanese. $2 billion announcement from the feds for Melbourne's new suburban rail loop. The Premier launched a scathing broadside, though, at the Prime Minister. Have a listen.
Every federal dollar that Victorians get from the miserable Morrison government, we ought to bow our head and treat it like it's foreign aid.
Is he a pushover, Mr Andrews?
That is a ridiculous suggestion that would only be made by a bloke who is so desperate because he's been there for a decade and done precisely nothing.
And all those times, Rachel, that Scott Morrison resisted the calls to criticise Andrews over all those hotel quarantine failures and the 6 lockdowns, it didn't buy him any cover today, did it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, as a state political reporter, I'm in the interesting position. I actually spent 4 days up until Sunday on Anthony Albanese's bus, subbing in for a Canberra colleague, and then came back to Melbourne yesterday only to go to Anthony Albanese's press conference as a Spring Street reporter this morning. But you're absolutely right. I mean, Daniel Andrews just doesn't miss an opportunity to have a go at the federal government. And as a Spring Street reporter, since well before the federal election kicked off, I think we've spent a lot more time, even during state parliament question time, hearing about the faults of the Morrison government from the state government than actually talking about what the state government's up to down here at the moment.
Yeah, of course, he's got an election, the Victorian Premier, on the 22nd of November, and he's fighting for his life. Let's go your way, Matt. A resignation of your Chief Minister. People are telling me out of the NT that both the seats up there, you've got 2 seats only, Solomon and Lingiari, currently held by Labor both, but they are at risk of moving to the CLP, to the coalition. What's the story? Was that behind the move of Gunner today?
Well, I'm not convinced it was, Peter. He did say that it was for personal reasons, and we do know he just had his second child, or his wife just gave birth to their second child last week. Look, I believe that, to be honest, I think that he had a pretty confronting 12 to 24 months in front of him with an ICAC investigation into the charging of Zachary Rolfe and some other matters that were going to be pretty tough for the Chief Minister. I think he thought it was better to bail out now. But on that issue of those 2 federal seats, I think that Solomon The way I'm seeing it at the moment, Solomon, I think will probably be a Labor hold. The CLP are a little bit fractured. There's been a defection of a CLP party member to run for the Liberal Democrats. But I think the seat of Lingiari is going to be very interesting. Warren Snowden, who's been the incumbent there since the seat was created in 2001, is retiring. Marion Scrimgeour is the Labor Party candidate, but she's from the Tiwi Islands, not particularly well known in Alice Springs, where the Mayor, Damien Ryan, is running for the CLP, or the former Mayor. And crime is a huge issue in Alice Springs and has been for more than 12 months. I think that's something that voters might express their frustration about at the ballot box. And if they do in big numbers, then I think that the coalition's a real chance to pick up that seat of Lingiari.